My name is Jennifer Morak, and I'm the Program Director here at EdWeb. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, New Elementary Lessons, and a live interview with Medal of Honor recipient Charles Hagemeister. It's presented by the Congressional Medal of Honor Foundation. If you're joining with students today or your class, please use the text chat to tell us about the name of your school and the grade level of the class. And feel free to post any student questions there also. We're so happy to have you here with us today. So this webinar is part of the free Lessons of the Personal Bravery and Self-Sacrifice Professional Learning Community on Community on EdWeb. The recording, slides, and chat log will be posted in the Webinar Archives folder of the community. As a member of this community, you can access all past webinars and take the CE quizzes to earn a certificate for each recording that you view. Now, if you're attending today's live session, you will receive an email with your CE certificate within 24 hours at the email address that you used to log in with today. If you're viewing the recording or joined by phone, you will need to join the Lessons of Personal Bravery and Self-Sacrifice community and to take a quiz to earn your certificate. So here's some tips for a better viewing experience today. For better audio and video, close other applications that use bandwidth. If you're having any audio issues, you can use the phone option by clicking on the More button at the top of the screen. You can maximize your screen for a larger view by hovering over the upper right-hand corner of the slides to enable the maximize slide button. But we will be pulling the slides down for a little bit of this webinar today, so just remember that. If you have any problems, the staff from EdWeb will be standing by to assist you, so you can just reach out to them in the chat. Now, as a reminder, please type any questions for our recipient in the chat box because we're going to be collecting them for the Q&A at the end of the interview. And please, if you're joining with your students or your class, feel free to post those student questions there also. We're really looking forward to today's event, New Elementary Lessons, an interview with Medal of Honor recipient Charles Hagemeister. Now, it is my honor to turn this webinar presentation over to the Vice President of Education for the Congressional Medal of Honor Foundation, Kathy Ellers-Metcalf, and her guest, Medal of Honor recipient Charles Hagemeister.
Greetings, students and teachers and community members. It's good to talk to you today. Chuck and I are here from New York City, where we're in town for Medal of Honor Week events. And today's webinar, we're going to talk about courage, character, commitment, and a couple of new elementary school lessons and what this Medal of Honor means to the man who wears it. So I'll be interviewing Chuck in a few minutes, but first a little background. I'm talking today both to students and teachers, so students, please hang in there while I give your teachers some pointers about the lessons that we're sharing, and then we'll go on to the interview. About the lessons, at the end of the hour today, Jennifer's going to share with you our new elementary school lesson on courage. That one's based on a fable and has students look at the story and then discuss ways that they can explore courage in their own lives. But today during the interview, I'll ask Chuck some questions about courage, so you can be thinking about that. The first lesson that I'm going to talk about, though, is not written down, and the high school and middle school version it's lesson F3 in our curriculum. So teachers, you can find that on our website, lesson F3. And Jennifer, again, will mention that at the end as well. But that lesson is on backwards interviewing, and it has students look at a recipient interview on the vignette and then write questions based on the information that they learned from that. So for elementary school teachers, what I would suggest you do is take a slightly different approach to that interviewing and encourage students to think about who they would want to interview and what they might learn from those interviews, and then go home and see who in their family or their community they could talk to. And I'm going to talk to students in a few minutes about the different purposes of interviews. So teachers, you can then go with grade level specific assignments to match that, while the middle school and high school version, of course, involves longer assignments and, in fact, written papers and oral presentations. For elementary school students, it might be on a much different level depending on whether you're teaching pre-readers, readers, fluent readers, where you are in the development of those children. So Students, as I interview Chuck today, I would ask that you pay careful attention to what additional questions you would have for him, because we're going to share his story in bits and pieces. Now, his story is available as a whole in our living histories. He has already told that story, and it's nicely presented on the website. And your teachers may be able to show that to you in class, or you could watch it, in fact, on your computers. But we'll talk a little bit about what his experiences were, and then I would like you to think about who you might want to interview in your own lives, because we've talked a lot already about freedom and courage and sacrifice and citizenship. So those are the things we're going to look at. For interviews, why interview? What we tend to think of interviews as something that people on TV do or that newspaper journalists do. But there are several reasons to interview someone. We interview people because we either know, usually to begin with, because we already know something about that person. That person is particularly interesting to us because of some major accomplishment, perhaps because he or she lived during a particular event or accomplished a certain goal or survived some kind of hardship, or maybe has some specialized knowledge that we would like to be able to share and to learn about. And usually those kinds of interviews are focused on what are known as journalist questions, the who, what, where, when, and how. How do things happen? And then also we usually interview for a purpose. And in my case, I like to interview for the why question. Why did somebody do what they did? Why was what they did important? Why was the experience that they had such an important experience in his or her life? And then to really get the importance out of an interview, you need to assess the responses. What can we learn from the responses of the person that we're interviewing? So now to the real subject. I'm going to talk with Chuck. And you noticed, students, that he is wearing this beautiful blue ribbon around his neck with this medal. And this is the Medal of Honor. Some of you are probably in classes where you've been working with the Medal of Honor Character Development Program, and therefore you know about the medal. It is the highest military award that the U.S. awards service people. Now, service people, in this case, military service people. Service goes all across our society, though. Firemen, policemen, teachers, nurses, doctors, volunteers for the community, your scoutmasters, those are all people who are in service. Anybody can be in service. In Chuck's case, this was military service. I'm going to ask him to tell us a little bit about his story, and I'm going to ask you to send in questions as you think of them. So to get us started, your military service began pretty much with Vietnam and your work as a medic. But would you tell us a little about how you got into the service to begin with?
In 1966, I was drafted into the Army, which means I didn't volunteer. My friends and neighbors sent me. I stayed out of the college for a semester, and as soon as you stayed out of college in those days, you were invited to join the service. And
you were invited, but did you have a choice about your RSVP?
No, I didn't have a choice. It was, family I grew up in, if you were called, you went, and there was no question about it. And you didn't get to stay there.
So it wasn't just service, but it was also duty.
It was duty, and I knew I was going to go, and I was ready. So no surprise.
You were ready. How old were you?
19.
19, at an age when a lot of kids in this country today, the great majority of kids in this country, are figuring out what they want to do with their lives, or perhaps in college, and also figuring out what they want to do with their lives. Now, before you got to that point, tell us a little bit about where you grew up.
I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska. Like I said, the Great Midwest. I've got three older sisters. Mm-hmm. My dad died when I was 3, so my mother raised us. Good job of it. We had help from the church, and so it was typical Midwest life. And I went out of high school. I went to University of Nebraska and didn't really find what I wanted. Ran out of money, so I decided to work for a semester, and that's when I got drafted.
Okay, and then when you were drafted, tell us a little bit about your training.
I took my basic training at Fort Polk, Louisiana, and that was in those days the the advanced infantry training was right across the road from us, and so you spent your entire basic training time being told that if you're lucky, you'll get to drag your duffel bag across the road and become an infantryman, go to Vietnam, and about 20 to 25 people out of my basic training class were tapped to go to Fort Sam Houston medical training. And like I said, a kind of a side story was my bunkmate in basic training, Carmel Harvey, drug his duffel bag across the road, went to infantry training, and November we ended up back in the same battalion in Vietnam.
Really? But you went to Fort Sam
I
Houston.
went to be a medic. He went to be an infantryman.
So you didn't have a choice to be a medic?
No choice. And so, like I said, we ended up back in the same battalion in Vietnam, and I was recommended for my Medal of Honor in March 1966, and he was recommended posthumously for his Medal of Honor in July 1966.
Wow. Now, for students' information, for those of you who aren't familiar with the term posthumous, that means that recommendation was made after that serviceman died. So he didn't make it.
He didn't make it.
But you were in the same battalion.
Same battalion. He was in the Bravo Company. I was in the Alpha Company.
Okay.
So it was it's a coincidence. It doesn't happen very often.
So you were only in the service for were you in as long as a year before you were sent to Vietnam?
Came in May of 1966, and in November of 1966, I was in Vietnam.
So
6 months.
6 months. That's not very much training. Did you feel ready?
No, I'm scared to death. Yeah, you're never ready for things like that. You go through all the training and you try to absorb as much as you can, but you don't know what you're getting into. It's a new situation, and combat is a hard thing to do. That's why we knew where we were going.
So some of the fear came from not knowing what you were getting into.
Some of the fear comes from not knowing what you're getting into, and you can never predict what's going to happen in combat. So you just have to be ready for all kinds of things.
Did you feel like the Army did a pretty decent job of helping you get ready in that limited amount of time?
I think we were more dedicated toward training for people to get ready to go to work at hospitals and less time to get ready for the combat side of the thing. And I didn't go to a hospital. I went to the combat side.
Right, but isn't that what medics are supposed to do? Aren't they trained to go take care of people in a combat situation?
Yes, but there's still the thing of the training at that point in time was still dedicated for turning out hospital corpsmen.
Okay. And there's, as you said, there's probably no real way to prepare you for being in combat anyway.
There's no way to prepare.
Okay. Now, did they also train you for combat?
Somewhat. It was not the primary focus. We spent more time learning how to set up hospital boards and doing those duties you would have in the hospital, and as when you're 19 old and just getting into the thing, you don't realize that where you're going to go and what you're going to do. And I would have liked to have had more time getting down that side of the train.
Okay. Now, from the time that you were sent to Vietnam until your Medal of Honor action, was your Medal of Honor action on your first deployment to Vietnam?
I only had one.
You only had one.
Only had one deployment.
Okay.
I went. Like I said, I got there in November. Went to the field in December, and the action that resulted in my Medal of Honor was in March.
In March. Okay. So, and then you came home after that?
No, I just finished my tour. I
Finished your tour.
Came home in November of '67.
Okay. And when did you find out that you were going to get the Medal of Honor?
I had 10 days left in the Army. I was getting ready to get out of the Army.
So in 68.
I was a 2-year draftee, 1968.
Okay.
I was getting ready to get out of the Army. 10 days left, they notified me that I was receiving the Medal of Honor.
Wow. Let's back up a little bit for the students who haven't yet heard your story. You were working in the midst of a combat zone as a medic. when that Medal of Honor action happened, but it didn't just involve saving so many lives, which you did. You saved a good many of our guys' lives. What else would you be willing to share a little bit else of what went on? Because your story is a lot, not just about saving lives, but about leadership and when the leaders were down and out.
Our company was, like I said, the battle I was involved with started at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we were not committed until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. One of the companies that was in the battle early in the morning had lost some of their leadership people, and we were sent in to wake up with them and be with them the rest of that night. We didn't quite get there. We walked into the home village of the battalion that had been fighting since 8 o'clock that morning. And so as it was just starting to get dark, we walked into a graveyard, and they had the village. And like I said, I lost in the first volley of the fight. My platoon leader was wounded. We lost a machine gunner, and it went downhill from there. There was total confusion. The thing is that we had 5 guys that were brand new in the company, and it was their first day in the field, so it was kind of, you had to look at who you were going to supervise first, and my job was to take care of the wounded, and I could see early on that I had more wounded than I had healthy, and I was trying to tell the company commander that if we don't get some more help, we're not going to get our wounded out, and so he said that the 3rd platoon couldn't find us. And I knew where they were, and I said, I'm going back to get help from the 3rd platoon. And so I took off across open ground and kind of realized about halfway there that that's the side the enemy was coming around, and maybe I was not the brightest deal. And but I got back to the platoon sergeant and said I needed at least 4 people, and he turned to his people and said, Doc Hagemeister needs 4 people in the ambush to get the wounded out. And when I got back into the ambush, I had 4 people with me, and I could show them where the enemy was and put them in position. And about 11 o'clock at night, they told us to start getting our wounded out and pulling back out of the ambush, because it was kind of a stalemate. And so we spent the time getting the wounded out, and that was my major job, was to get the wounded out. Didn't know that I was going to be the guy in charge doing that, all that stuff. Like I said, it was a bad night. At 1 o'clock in the morning, we got all our wounded out, evacuated, and then we had no, like I said, I always say we had no adult supervision the next morning. And when the call came for the air assault that next afternoon, we just did our job. We knew as the 1st platoon, we had the first helicopters. We knew who went on which helicopter, and when we landed the helicopters, we had the perimeter from 10 and 2. That was a standard operating procedure, and so we knew what we were doing, whether we had no one in charge to tell us that. And so we went on our air assault, and we got on the ground. The first sergeant was saying, "Why are you guys doing? You have no platoon leader. You have no platoon sergeants." And we said, "Yeah, that's our job."
So all this happened in a very short amount of time, under fire, at night. And how old were you?
19.
19 years old.
19 years old.
With 6 months of training, and you took charge and went for help and told everybody what to do while you guys were also caring for the wounded. There's a lot more there than just doing your job of caring for the wounded, and that is very, very impressive from my perspective. A huge amount of responsibility for a young person to do.
Like I said, my job was the medic, and I have to get my wounded out, and what I have to do to get my wounded out is paramount. And so it becomes your job, and you kind of step over the line. And Lieutenant Larson was wounded. He couldn't give the orders, so someone had to tell who what to do. And so
you did what needed to be done in the circumstances.
Yep.
So the question from this first grader at Beach Haven School in New Jersey is, how did you have the courage to do all those brave things that day? So what would you tell a first grader about having courage to do that?
Those people that were in that fight that night, with the exception of the 5 new guys that I barely knew their name, those were people who I had spent 24 hours a day from the 4th of December until that time. We were together in the field that entire time. And that's the closest thing to family you can get. And when someone in your family is in trouble, you will do whatever you have to do. Take care of them.
Very good. That's a wonderful answer. Thank you. So you guys have been together all that time, nonstop, and so you trusted each other, I presume.
You trusted each other. You relied on each other. When I got to the company, the first sergeant, Sergeant West, he said that you will always stay with your machine gunners, and they will be your bodyguards, and they will tell you when to go out and get wounded. And I thought that was a great idea because I'd like a bodyguard. But that night in the first volley, I lost one of the machine gunners, and very shortly thereafter, the other machine gunner was wounded. So I couldn't stay with a machine gunner because that was not the safest place. And so you just kind of do what you have to do from there. And so, like I said, I lost one machine gunner. The other one was wounded.
So at that point, you were taking care of the machine gunner.
I was taking care of the machine gunner and doing all the things that I had to do to keep as many people in the fight as we could.
And your story is different from most Medal of Honor recipient stories in that you were not wounded in the process of your.
And I was not wounded. Like I said, someone was watching over
You
me.
had a busy guardian angel, and you were a very tall man, so you probably didn't make a very small target out there at the time.
Said that I kept being surprised that that I didn't get hit. I had a lot of close.
Didn't your pack get hit?
My pack got hit many times. I got rid of it real quick.
It sounds like it was protecting you.
I was laying underneath it when I got hit, and you're trying to be the smallest target you can get, and not be obvious, but I didn't have the choice. I had to move from place to place and take care of wounded and do all those things I had to do.
So you just kept working through the fear.
Kept working, and then and when they finally said that that we were trying to withdraw, I changed from going forward to going back.
And somebody else then was given orders again.
Someone else.
Okay, great. Now you just talked about they're the closest thing to family, and so I'm going to bet that clearly you have that foundation of a family relationship that you compared that to. Mm-hmm. And you just told us you lost your dad, but your mom raised 4 of you. I'm betting that your mom was a pretty strong woman.
Like I said, I always said my mom was probably the best role model you can get. She told us, she set the boundaries, and I knew growing up what the right limit and the left limit was, and I knew not to tread across that because consequences were there. And that's something that is that I see now is that the people don't know about the consequences that they should have growing up. And that's one of the things that the country needs to work on, is get the kids back to the right and left limits.
I'm going to bet that kind of training played into your military training, in that you were taught to follow orders or to pay attention to the consequences, and it probably helped keep you safe as much as
it did. I think that's probably the thing is that if you do what you're supposed to do and follow the rules, you're gonna succeed. And I know it helped me throughout my life.
So a lesson that you learned before you got there and then stuck with you later on. Now, you also mentioned that you had support from the church. So You said your mom was the best role model you could have, but did you have other role models that?
The church we attended growing up, they assigned one of the senior members of the church to be a mentor, and to make sure you followed all the rules and things like that, and to support you growing up. Ray Gans was kind of mine. He was a fireman and one of the leaders in the church, and he was the guy that introduced me to hunting and fishing and doing all those things as I was growing up, and I knew I could go to him if I needed guidance, and it helps. That male role model in the family is a great help.
And what a great example of someone who in your community stepped up when you lost your dad. That's super. So you weren't just raised by your mom and your 3 older sisters.
Not really. I give them the credit, but I know that Ray Gans did a lot for me.
That is super. That kind of community support, I think, is a reflection on citizenship in this country, and some of the qualities that we look at related to the Medal of Honor that you gentlemen who wear that Medal of Honor talk about are citizenship and patriotism. And to me, being a good citizen means to do the best you can in whatever community you live in, whether you're talking your home community, your school community, your local community. But being a good citizen of your country means being patriotic, that if you are a good citizen of your country, that's what develops into patriotism. What would you share with students is most important about patriotism?
I think knowing what you owe your country, and that all the stuff you're getting back is not a freedom thing. I don't think the kids understand that that the education they get, while it's free, isn't free. Someone earned it for them. The teachers that are out there are providing that thing, and you kind of you owe them the respect that they're due. And it's we need to get back to the old days, I guess I have to say, in that we don't. Kids, they don't see the consequences, where they step over the bounds and no one pulls them back. They just don't do it.
Kind of speaks to taking responsibility for when you make a mistake, stepping up and admitting it when you make a mistake and doing what you need to fix it. And first of all, whenever possible, not whenever possible, but always trying to make the right choice and follow through on that. But if you make a mistake, to fess up to it and claim responsibility.
My wife is a teacher, and she sees the kids that think that that the school owes them something, and it's not their responsibility to learn. That's wrong. And where I grew up, my parents were on the side of the teacher, and not me. So you have required to hold the line. And so it's an interesting thing is that as society has drifted, is that we need to get back to that. And that's the things we try to get back to the country is the leadership, the responsibility, the citizenship, and that we as an individual owe something to this country, and that this country was not a free thing.
Somebody paid for that freedom.
Somebody paid
Definitely, and we have a responsibility in turn to hang on to that. I taught for a long time too, and I used to tell my students when we talk about freedom that you have freedom here, but with freedom comes responsibility. That I'm free to flail my arms around until my arm comes into contact with your nose, in which case I've infringed upon your freedom to sit there and not get hurt. So I think the responsibility really fits in there really, really well. You ended up staying in the military, even though you were just talking a few minutes ago about how you were drafted for 2 years and you heard about getting the Medal of Honor 10 days before you were due to get out. And so we have this sense of suspense now that Chuck was in for 2 years. He was shot at a lot. He got out without getting hurt, physically hurt, amazingly, and was ready to get out. But what did you end up doing with your career?
I spent 24 years in the Army.
Oh,
Uh,
2 to 24. Tell us
yeah,
about
I
that.
was, drafted for 2 years. When I was decorated, and I was standing in front of the President of the United States. He asked me how long I had left in the Army, and I told him I had 72 hours. And he immediately had set up that the Chief of Staff of the Army and I had a heart-to-heart talk that afternoon. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up yet. And, so they said that while you were drafted for 2 years, you had a 6-year military commitment, and they kind of hold you on to this thing, and they really wanted me to stay in the Army and all these other things, and what would it take to get you to stay in? And so I finally said, well, maybe this is not such a bad job. If I'm not going back to the war immediately and things like that. So I said I'd stay for 4 more years, and so I re-enlisted for 4 years, and that 4 years ended up being 24 years. I stayed in until the Army decided they wanted me to go back to Europe. My kids were in high school, and so I said, maybe I should put the family first, so I retired. 1990. Went to work for a government contractor.
And you're still working
Still
for the
working for
government
a government
contractor. That's a lot of years of service in a lot of different ways. Two things that you just said really struck me. One was that after 2 years in the Army and being awarded the Medal of Honor, you still didn't know what you wanted to do when you grew up.
I think a lot of kids are that way still. I have 2 children, and both of them, when they were in college, changed their majors. And I think, as parents, we said, that's fine, but you're gonna graduate in 4 years, or you're gonna have to pay for it yourself. And so kids need to have that opportunity to go out and change their mind. It's when you're coming out of high school, if you're sure what your life's going to be, you're obviously not know what your life's going to be, because it's going to change so many times. And at that point in time, I had tried college, and it really wasn't for me, and I didn't know what I mean. And the Army was a secure place for me to be, and I knew what I was doing there, and I was pretty good at it. So I stayed. I said, I can go back and I can train medics. I can tell them what they're going to get into, and be a pretty good role model for them as they're going through their training. And it seemed like a good thing to do. So I signed up for 4 more years, and then about 18 months later, I was given the opportunity to apply for my commission. And so I applied for my commission as a 2nd lieutenant, and I spent the rest of the time as an armor officer.
What does an armor officer do?
He command tanks units, and as I always used to say, is that this doesn't stop anything, and it's a lot safer inside of a tank. So I spent the rest of the time as an armor officer.
Very good. So the other thing that struck me when you were first talking about not knowing what you wanted to do, and then had a heart-to-heart talk with the commander-in-chief,
Chief of Staff
of the Army. But it kind of sounds like that heart-to-heart talk was not a level talk. It was more of him convincing you. But he just gave a bunch of really good reasons.
He did, the outcome was I was promoted to staff sergeant. I had a very rapid rise in the Army. I was an E5 with less than a year in the Army. I was an E6 with less than 2 years in the Army, and then ended up being commissioned early on. So I had a chance for a full career. But he told me all the benefits, and that it was a great opportunity for me to stay. And then I could go down to Fort Sam Houston, and I could train medics, and I could I get my re-enlistment bonus and all those other things. So it was
a smart career choice.
It was a smart career choice.
Okay, well that is great. We are starting to get a bunch of questions from kids. So there are a couple here that I think I would suggest to students, one thing that was asked was, where in Vietnam was the battle? But I'm not going to have you answer that, because our students, something that a reporter should always do is go read the background story. So I would strongly suggest that the student who's interested, a lot of our students probably don't know the geography of Vietnam very well. I certainly don't know Vietnam very well. So it would be good to read Chuck's Medal of Honor citation, which tells you what happened and where the battle was, and then look at a map, and then you'll have a better sense of where in the country it was than if we just name a city for you. So let's look at some of these others. So for instance, were you sent to Vietnam with any good friends?
I went over to Vietnam. One of the Boy West, who I was inducted with, we went through initial entry station, and we went through basic training together, and we went through AIT together, and we went to Vietnam on the same plane. And we came back on the same plane, which was quite strange to happen.
I bet that was pretty unusual.
It was.
Were you in the same platoon?
We're on the same. We didn't see each other the entire 11 months we were in Vietnam.
But you ended up on the same plane home.
Coming home.
That is pretty cool. Another question. These are generally from students. Were other members of your family in the military?
Not very many.
But you had all those sisters, and then not a lot of
I had
women
three
went into the
sisters.
military.
I had a cousin that served in Korea, and so that was kind of the extent of it. And my kids, while they haven't served in the military, my son is a police officer, and I consider that quite honorable service. And my
Definitely.
daughter's in the health profession, and I consider that quite a service.
And your wife is a teacher.
My wife's a teacher.
Yeah, we almost never see her because she is so dedicated to you students out there. The question here is, how were you able to make such a sacrifice with family back home? I think that's specifically a question about Vietnam.
Yeah.
So you didn't have any wife or children when you went to Vietnam?
I didn't have any wife or children. It was me taking care of myself and things like that.
And also taking care of your country by doing your duty to your country. Okay, so and this is a question of what motivated you to help others, which I think you answered a little bit, but
we were close.
Yeah, you were family. So you were
family.
looking after the guys who were with you. You already did raise that. How often do you actually wear your medal? And I think the question that goes with this is, under what circumstances do you wear it?
The recipient can wear his medal whenever he wants. You can find any occasion to wear the medal. I wear it for formal occasions and for patriotic events, and when I think that it needs to be, worn. And so I said I can wear it whenever I need to do it. So I said I don't wear it that often, but I wear it quite proudly.
What do you do with it when you're not wearing it?
Stays in a box at home.
In a box. Okay. All right. It says here, Mrs. Chen's class of fifth graders wants to thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. This is a slightly different question than I asked earlier. We talked a little bit about being scared in Vietnam with people shooting at you. Anybody with some sense would be scared there. But were you scared to enter the military?
Anytime you embark on a new adventure, there's a certain amount of fear, and you just have to learn to do it and do it the best you can.
Well, this is, I think, a related question. Did you face other difficult situations besides your Medal of Honor action?
Nothing as serious as the Medal of Honor action. There were other real difficult situations, and taking care of them. But that night was as I say, was the high point of my combat experience.
High point. It's interesting, isn't it, the way we use the phrase high point? Because I think for a lot of people, we might look at it as the low point, but certainly the point at which you had to step up and go beyond what you ever thought. And students, I would point out that the Medal of Honor, the standard Medal of Honor citation reads, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty." And those are some phrases that many of you read now on the titles of movies and video games and books and such. But let me point out that Conspicuous means obvious gallantry, not something where you think, oh, did that guy do something? But rather, wow, did you see what that guy did? Conspicuous gallantry, great bravery and courage at the risk of his life. That meant that he was putting himself in peril to do what he was doing at that point. And the phrase above and beyond the call of duty means that it is more and greater than any of his commanding officers, the Army as a whole, the country, and anybody else would have expected him to do. And had he chosen not to do those particular actions for which he was awarded the Medal of Honor, he would not have been subject to any reprimand. So I would point out that that's pretty significant as far as that is concerned. What was it like to be away from your family?
It was emotionally hard to be away from them, because I'd spent the first 18 years and probably the furthest was 30 miles away. All of a sudden I'm on the other side of the world, and you kind of all of a sudden you fall into this other new family, and so I'm a terrible letter writer, and so you get in trouble for not writing.
And we didn't have internet, or
we
couldn't
internet.
call from there.
Nope. And so I used to get form letters from my sister and fill in the blank and send it back to her. So it was a hard thing to do. As the current world where they have the internet and have all the things like that, I don't think it makes it any easier. But we knew we were going to go away for a year, and then we were going to come home. So you counted the time halfway to get there and halfway to come home, and that's how you counted your time.
Now, this is a slightly different question. This is, students, you asked about what it's like to be away from family, but Chuck's answer made me think of another related question. And this kind of happens with interviews, that as you learn things, that the interview goes different directions. So that made me think when you said you'd never been more than 30 miles away from home, and Lincoln, Nebraska is pretty much in the middle. It's right out there in the middle of farm country, cornfields, a lot of flat land, what we call the breadbasket of the United States. And where you ended up was an entirely different geography. So not only were you in a place where they didn't speak English, but
when I came in the Army, that was the first airplane ride, and the first time out of my home state, and with a whole new bunch of people. It was a lot of new experiences.
And then when you got to Vietnam, you were in what kind of terrain?
Our battalion was kind of the Division Ready Reaction Force, so we went all over our area. We were in the mountains. We were in the rice paddies. We spent 10 days out on the ocean, patrolling out by the ocean.
Nebraska's a long way from the ocean.
A long way from the ocean. And so we saw a lot. You saw a lot of Vietnam. Didn't take a lot of pictures because camera was actually something hard to carry. It's heavy, and you lived out of your backpack, so you learn what you carry, what you need. And the few pictures I took, that we got developed and sent back, people said, "Oh, it's such a beautiful country." Well, it was a beautiful country, and most of the people were wonderful. We just had that small minority that didn't like us very well.
Yeah, and didn't like a lot of their own people as well. Yeah. Some interesting diversity of questions here. So I'm going to go back to some student questions. What was your first thought, if you were thinking about it, when you risked your life?
When that fight started that night, where I was getting shot at, my life was at risk, and I figured it couldn't get any worse from there.
Well, that's an interesting perspective. You might as well go on doing what you're doing and get out of there as soon as you could.
I'd been with the platoon leader's machine gun team, and the platoon sergeant's machine gun team was more in the middle of the fight. So when the fight started, I was going from one machine gun team to the other, and I got caught in the middle, and
wow,
it went downhill from there.
Gosh, amazing story. In hindsight, would you have chosen to be a medic?
Probably not. I didn't know what I wanted to be, and and if I had thought I knew what I wanted to be, I would probably I would have enlisted if I wanted to be something, so I would just go
Good
take a
point.
look at the drawing.
Yeah, so see where it
Yeah,
took you.
see
It
where-
turned out to be fate that you ended up there, so
Yep.
see where you went. This question, I think that what you've told us about the rest of your life already answered this question, and that's something to think about, students. When I mentioned earlier in interviews, you go back and assess what you heard and put it together and draw conclusions, but let's see if the conclusion you drew is the same as the answer that you come up with. Are you happy that you chose to remain in the military?
I don't regret any of the time I spent in the military. A lot, like I said, you spend time with a lot of really great people. I traveled the world, and I don't regret any of it.
This is kind of a fun one. How did your family respond to the Medal of Honor citation? Either to the citation or actually to the awarding. Those are two different questions, by the way.
The night of the action that happened, my platoon leader had borrowed my watch. And when we medevacked him, I didn't get my watch back. So I wrote my mother a letter, asked her to send me, can you get to the PX in the field? And I wrote my mother a letter and said, please send me a watch. Cheap Timex. And she got the letter the same day the guy from the UPI came to interview her about her son getting recommended for the Medal of Honor. The letter that came back to Chuck Hagemeister was scathing.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, she was, you're not telling us all the truth. So, by the time it got back there, I'd been pulled out of the field, and I said, well, Mom, yeah, I didn't tell you the truth. I didn't want you to worry. But now I'm out of the field, so you don't have to worry anymore.
So in your letter writing process, you were actually trying to protect your family at home.
Yeah, you're not going to say, Mom, we got in a fight last night, and I had 2 killed, 11 wounded, and it was a 6-hour fight. You don't send that home.
And kids, there's another lesson too, that sometimes not knowing is good. We tend to live in a time when everybody thinks they need to tell everything about everybody and everything that's going on. And sometimes there are good reasons to keep secrets, not to avoid the truth, but to protect people. This is a fun question right at this very moment. Do you know any other recipients?
Oh, yes. The Medal of Honor Society, the guys that wear this ribbon, we're close. We take care of each other. We know each other. We know each other by sight. Like I said, on this trip, I've spent probably a half hour talking to Ed, the newest, the Navy SEAL that just received it. Great person. And we will be friends forever. It's part of a brotherhood that we're in it.
Absolutely, you're like family. We're coming to you from New York today, where, as I mentioned, we're here for Medal of Honor Week activities, and tomorrow we'll be going to Washington, D.C., where the Medal of Honor recipients will lay a wreath at Arlington and then present Citizen Honors Awards to regular citizens of the United States who have provided great service to other citizens and to their country. So there are definitely a bunch of them here. We had 30 at dinner last night, 30 of you in the same room, which is a fairly rare circumstance because as of yesterday, we only have 77 living Medal of Honor recipients. A couple more questions before we run out of time. One student wants to know if you remember what it was like when you were a middle school student. That would be somewhere around, 5th through 8th grade, depending on where students are in school.
Barely.
Same here.
Barely. It's that's going back a lot of years. Last weekend I was driving from Nashville, Tennessee back to Leavenworth, Kansas, and then came to the realization that my action was 50 years ago last weekend. And when you start, now let's try to go back to how far before that was middle school.
Time flies, doesn't it?
Time flies when you're having fun. But I said my middle school scary time. We were in a brand new high school, and these were the days when you were your 7th grade through high school were in the same building, and it was a scary time because you had to put up with all those people who were juniors and seniors, and they liked to harass the kids. We were the kids. So,
now, you have a 13-year-old grandson, I believe.
I do have a 13-year-old grandson.
What would you like him and his classmates to know about the Medal of Honor?
I think they have to. It's something that the kids can. They can read the stories. They can. They play all the video games, all the person shooter things, is that what they need to look at is that if you read into the citations that most of us wear, it's for saving the lives. It's not how many you shot or killed or anything like that. It's how many things you did to cause the receipt of your Medal of Honor that were for saving people or taking care of people and things like that. This is not this is a war medal. It's a combat medal, but most of the recipients, I say that the guy that Carmel Harvey, I went to basic training with, the one who died. He was wounded, and they had a round come by his web gear and ignite a grenade. And even though he was wounded already, he rolled over and smothered that grenade to protect the other wounded, and that's what killed him. So here's a guy who gives up his life to save others, and most of the citations read in that drift is that we're doing what we do because we love our brothers, and we take care of them. We go to great lengths to take care of each other.
You actually have a number of Medal of Honor recipients still living whose medals were mainly awarded for having thrown themselves on grenades or deflecting grenades in an effort to save their man.
That's what military people do, is we take care of each other, and that's the biggest thing.
The team.
Yeah, and some of us get to wear the ribbon, and there's, like I said, there's a lot of people out there that probably should be wearing the ribbon that aren't yet.
We only have a few minutes left. I've got two more questions. One about what kind of friendships you made during your years in the military.
Like I said, you meet a lot of people, and some of them are short-lived friendships, and some of them last longer. I still communicate with one of the guys that was in that battle with me. In fact, every time I drive down to visit my daughter, I call him when I'm on the road, and we try to meet for a meal on the way.
That is great.
We stop and have, and those things, those friendships you developed in the military, they last forever. You may not be face to face with them, but you still know about them, and you still stay with them.
Well, shared experiences that nobody else can really understand. One more question, and then I think we need to wrap it up, and that's, how can students today honor our veterans?
How do they honor veterans? You thank them for their service, to start with. And you sit down and you talk to them. Those veterans out there have the greatest stories, and it's not just the ones that wear medals. It's the ones that are going to tell you, what they did, whether it was as a cook or a clerk, or how they spent their time. And they have some, they have their stories, and they you need to spend time with them. And it's not just the veterans of the military; it's those other people who are in the service fields. Like I said, my son's a policeman, and I think that's probably that's a tougher job than mine. Those guys are out there every day. Firemen are out there every day. And like I said, they should be treated as veterans.
Great. Well, lots of good information here today. Thank you so much for the time that you've taken for this interview, and it's been fun talking with you and sharing with students and answering. I hope we've answered a lot of student questions. I would like to point out to students that we are the elementary school lesson that we're putting up for teachers to have access to, and Jennifer will tell you more about that when I stop talking here in just a second, is about courage. And it asks students to think about things like, what does it mean to be brave? And to talk about how students can build courage in themselves. And I would encourage you to think back through some of Chuck's answers today about being scared and going ahead and doing what you had to do, that not just on the battlefield, not just in a circumstance when something terrible is going on, but
it's stepping up and doing the job, whether you like it or not.
Public speaking. We sat here for a long time looking at this screen before we started broadcasting, talking about whether or not we were going to mess it up, right? But we went ahead and did it, and we're happy to talk to all of you today, and we hope that you will go back and look at lessons of courage and sacrifice and some vignettes, stories of Medal of Honor recipients, and learn from all they have to tell you. Thanks.
On behalf of all the students and educators attending today, the Foundation and the EdWeb team, we'd like to thank you, Mr. Hagemeister and Kathy, for joining us today. Chuck, we're so happy that you could share your story, and we'd like to thank you for your service to the country. It's been an honor and a privilege to have you here with us. Now, developed with educators, the Congressional Medal of Honor Foundation created the Character Development Program that teaches character through the stories of Medal of Honor recipients. This is a free resource, and it includes 50 lesson plans, 100 video vignettes, webinars, and primary source documents for school teachers to use in the classroom as examples of courage, integrity, and good citizenship. The program is built on the premise that all people have within them the capacity for extraordinary bravery and selfless service. Teachers, you can find these resources at the sites listed on this slide. Now, at this particular link here for the cmohedu.org, you can find all the Character Development Program lesson plans, all the videos, additional vignettes, and then upcoming events calendars such as the Citizen Honors, which they're celebrating for Medal of Honor Day. And there's a really great user-friendly search function. So please take a look at that link if you get the opportunity. It's really got a lot of great resources for your classroom. We'd like to invite everyone to join the free Lessons of Personal Bravery and Self-Sacrifice Professional Learning community on EdWeb. You'll see the link right there. The recording for this interview, slides, and chat log will be posted in the Webinar Archives folder of the community. As a member of this community, you can access all past webinars and recipient interviews and take CE quizzes to earn a certificate for each recording that you view. We invite you to join us with your students again and colleagues in your school for our next community interview, America's First Secret Hero interview with Medal of Honor recipient Hiroshi H. Miyamura. His nickname is Hershey. So we'd love for you to join, and you can go to this the EdWeb community and you can read his citation also and information about his interview and all of the upcoming events that the community is planning. We thank everyone for joining us today, students and teachers alike. It's always an honor to bring these recipient interviews to you, and we hope you'll join us in April.